or if there's any problems or anything. Hey everyone, I think I know almost everyone. Yeah, Alana Westwood here in Gejabuktuk. That's the Mi'kmaq word for Halifax. And I want to know, so open that chat bar, flex your finger muscles. Where do you get your news? CBC, social media, which social media? Pop in the chat where you get your news from. See who's actually back. So far, no one. Heather, DW. What's DW? Was that Democracy Watch? No.
I don't know. I'm going to go check it right now.
Sam, which news websites?
Mostly CBC, Narwhal, the New York Times.
I fully confess that myself, most of my news comes from things that are kind of being reshared by others on social media, whether kind of through Instagram stories or on Facebook. I go to CBC maybe once every couple days, go to the splash page. Podcasts, anybody else get their news from podcasts? I subscribe to The Current or other podcasts that are kind of news-y. Word of mouth. Okay. Well, thanks for sticking around for the second half of today's session, because I want to chat about something that's been very much on my mind lately, and some folks might be interested in. Many of the people here are researchers or involved in research. So I just kind of wanted to give a primer on how to navigate public communications as a researcher. Hopefully that slide advanced. Let me know if it didn't for you. So I've had a lot of experience with science communication in my career. I've been interviewed for TV, radio, print. I actually used to work for Evidence for Democracy. Vanessa Sung with E4D was here with us earlier, but had to go. And E4D provides training to scientists on how to interact with the media, engage in science communication. And when I worked for E4D, I used to give talks like this, as well as I used to give webinars and workshops on how to write and publish opinion editorials or press releases or those things. So I've been involved in this for a while, and I do want to give a special thanks to Evidence for Democracy for teaching me a lot of this that I'm now able to teach to you as well, and providing a lot of the resources that help me learn how to be effective at talking to the media. I also want to thank Samantha Chu, who's here on this call, because I stole her slide design because it was much nicer than the ugly slide design that I had before. So this presentation is going to be not too long, but I just want to very briefly talk about why scientists might want to communicate with the press, the media, introduce you to the media cycle. I'll share some recent examples of both proactive media and reactive media that I've been engaged in. We'll talk about how to get ready and stay ready for interacting with traditional media, and then we'll spend some time on Q&A. So can you let me know in the chat, have you ever been interviewed by the press? Or have you ever published an opinion editorial? Have you interacted in the press in any way? Yeah, Jenna, hop in.
Oh, sorry. I don't have access to the chat, so I was just raising my hand as a yes,
okay.
I've been interviewed by the news before.
That explains why the chat is quiet. Perhaps people don't have access to it.
Q of A, but it just says there was a problem loading your Q&A.
Great.
Yeah, sometimes it's a bit iffy with guest access sometimes. I think that it works for some and not all, but I'm going to get you on the list, Jenna.
Oh, no worries. I have a Dalhousie account. I'm just not using it today.
And if anyone just, when I'm kind of asking these prompts, if you just want to hop in and verbally contribute, please go ahead and do so. So far, I think a few of you have, many of you maybe haven't, so hopefully this is helpful. Some of you, there are certain folks on this call, Sam and MJ, who have some papers coming out soon that I think will be in the next newsletter that we'll be getting ready to do some interaction with the press, so pressure's on. But my personal belief is that scientists have a duty to communicate. So I believe that researchers, producers of knowledge, have a responsibility to provide accurate, firsthand information to the public. This is necessary so that the public can be informed, can make decisions based on being informed, and to counter misinformation. I'll share a couple of quotes with you. This is about the Government of Canada's own position on why scientific communication might be important. So they define scientific literacy as involving the use of key scientific concepts to understand and help make decisions. Also involves being able to recognize scientific questions, use evidence, draw scientific conclusions, and communicate these conclusions. I'm pretty sure everyone on this call agrees that scientific literacy is important. And to support scientific literacy, scientists need to be communicating to the public, accurate, timely, factual information. This is my favorite comic I've ever stumbled across. If anyone is a Redditor, you will feel this deep in your bones. But this quote from Heinz Pagels that science cannot resolve moral conflicts, but it can help to more accurately frame the debates around those conflicts. So by sharing our science, we can help reduce pseudoscience, combat misinformation, stuff that's been rampant in climate change, in public health. And finally, to sell you on why you might want to communicate the science that you do or the research work that you do with others, is it helps combat stigma and stereotypes. So we know that stigma powerfully and adversely affects individuals, families, communities, and societies. It's persistent. And we've also agreed, as put out by this Lancet Commission, that forms of social exclusion are no longer acceptable. And yet, just last week, this happens every week, I introduced myself to someone who said, "Oh, you don't look like you'd be a university professor." Yeah, I assume this person thought a university professor would look more like this guy in the picture here, or a researcher or scientist would look like that and not look like the three researchers I co-founded the Diversity of Nature group, which brings STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education and fieldwork and outdoor experiences to racialized youth. These folks, most have now graduated with their PhDs, including winning a number of awards for the best PhDs in their institutions. So by putting ourselves, especially scientists from kind of non-traditional backgrounds, putting ourselves in front of the camera, we can broaden the public's view of what a scientist looks like and who might have kind of knowledge and authority to speak to something. So I won't talk about knowledge exchange because you've just heard a whole presentation about it, but science communication typically with the media falls into one of two camps. One is one-way exchange. So researcher, I have done something and I think it should be shared with the public. I'm going to initiate a science communication procedure and go forth and take the information and put it out to the media. The other is solicited. So something has come up in the news cycle, which journalists are seeking comment or expert interview or something like that. They've identified sort of a knowledge gap for the public and are soliciting knowledge. So that's kind of where science interacting with the media tends to fall. So who does press? Who interacts with the press? Well, if you're at a university or you work for government or you work at a larger company, you will have a communications or a public relations team. They will possibly initiate press for you. If they receive press requests, they may connect with you if you are the expert on the subject and facilitate that interaction. If you publish in a big enough journal, I'm talking Nature, Science, +1, these are only the top tier journals, they will have their own communications team. They will be connecting, developing press releases, connecting regularly With reporters, for example, Science, the journal Science has dedicated reporters who just cover articles shared in Science through a sister publication aimed at the public called Science News. So if you're publishing in a high enough journal and you're going to spend $11,000 on the page fee to publish there, which is not going to happen for me, but they will take care of some of the press for you. And ultimately, as a researcher, producer of knowledge, you do press, and you're always a science communicator. So remember that no matter who you are around, people, when you know your uncle asks you what you do at a party, you have to suddenly switch into that science communicator mode. You're not going to speak to the people you interact with in your daily life the way you talk to your colleagues in your discipline. You're going to change your language and move into a science communication space. So for anyone who's sort of thinking about, maybe I would like to engage with the press, but I'm a little reticent or I'm not sure, just remember, you're doing this anyway. You're communicating with the public in a lay fashion about your work and its importance anyway in your regular life. So it's just kind of, it's not like a whole new area. It's just sort of the next step of something that you're already doing. So when it comes to public communication, there are a bunch of different tools, and I know not everyone can see the chat, but if you can see the chat, let me know what you think some of those are. I'll give you an example, like a press release is a tool of communication. Social media is a tool of communication. So think about some of the tools for scientists communicating to the public and pop some ideas in the chat if you have access to it. No ideas. Okay, that's all right. So some examples that I've come up with. Oh, I see writing an op-ed. Yeah, exactly. Opinion editorial. So social media, including Twitter, which I left off of this list stupidly. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, blogs, policy briefs are a form of public communication, just to a different audience. Webinars, trade shows, community presentations. There's a lot of different tools, and the tool you use is going to depend on the audience that you want to reach in terms of who is the public that you're trying to reach. The traditional media cycle goes like this. So before, say, a peer-reviewed publication, or before an event, or before something that you want to share that's going to be newsworthy, a media advisory goes out. So first, you need to figure out who you're going to send the media advisory to. That's typically a list of reporters. If you've been doing science communication, you'll start building up that list. If you have a communications department or PR for your organization, they'll have a list and be able to send it on your behalf. You might also be able to connect with other people in your field who you know do a lot of talking to the media to see if you can access their list, if they'll share with you their list. So what you usually do is you send a media advisory. It's going to notify them that a publication is coming out. There's going to be an event, something's happening that is noteworthy and newsworthy. You let them know that a press release will be coming. You write and send a press release. A press release is basically a one-pager that summarizes what's important about your research, why it's interesting, why it's novel, or why this event is happening, or whatever it is. It includes a summary, it includes the take-home message, and it actually includes quotes from the people involved. Often articles will get written where they'll never interview you or the other people involved. They will literally just take the quotes off the press release, kind of rejig the summary. They basically plagiarize you and slap it into an article and put it in print. So the better a press release you can write, or your comms team can write, and the better quotes you have, the more accurate it's likely to translate to the page. For both of these things, in Outlook or whatever your email client is, using the schedule to send later function is your friend. You want to schedule this to go out at 4 or 5 in the morning, so it's the first thing that shows up when your reporter contacts log into their email for the day. Often a press release will then lead to interviews. If there's an event, they might come to the event and interview you during the event, or if it's a publication, it'll after the publication or whatever comes out, you will start getting requests for interviews. You have to be ready for this. You have to clear your schedule. If you get a request for an interview by a reporter, they want to talk to you that same day. Their cycle moves so fast. If you decline, if you say, can we do tomorrow, they're going to move on and they're going to find someone else. That actually happened to me today. I recorded something this morning to be on the 6 o'clock news about wildfires, and then I got a request that said, we'd like to record something we want you to come to the studio for tomorrow morning's news, CTV or something. And I said, I can't come in today. I could come in tomorrow for Wednesday. And they said, nope, running the story tomorrow, too late, we'll find someone else. So you have to be ready that day. Clear your schedule or make it as flexible as possible if you know that media interviews might be coming. Now, that's if you sort of have something that you think the press will pick up on. If you're not sure that the press is going to bite, maybe you know this is significant or it's an issue, but there isn't a really clear public hook, and I'll talk more about what that means. You can also initiate the public interest through the writing of op-eds, which are opinion editorials, or social media. So in this case, the researcher or the promoter writes the content and shares it. In an op-ed, you basically write a 400 to 500 word article and you send it, you pitch it, I'll talk more about that, to a print outlet. They'll decide whether or not they want to run it. Social media, of course, you make and distribute yourself. Op-eds rely on editor acceptance. Social media relies on what kind of network you have and who's willing to share it and distribute it for you. So to be effective at working with traditional media, you kind of need to get in their heads a little bit. So editors make decisions super quickly. I dabbled in working in media. I have really good friends who are reporters. They're trying to cut together 6 stories in a couple of hours. They're trying to do print and radio and TV, and they don't really have time to think about it. So you need to be reactive, available, and really clear in your message about what you have to share with them. They're also in competition with each other. So know that when you're going out and contacting news outlets, they might want an exclusive story. So depending on the situation or what your research is, or if it's political, it might be worth thinking about which news outlets do you want covering your work or featuring you and which ones you don't. You need to think about when you're contacting news outlets, what their audience is. Is that audience going to be interested in you or your work? Because the more that you can meet their needs, the more likely they're going to pick up your story. Also, to get traction, you want to go with quality over quantity. For example, I don't send out every paper that I'm a co-author on as a press release. Many of them don't really have that much public interest, but the few that do have a clear public interest engagement component. So the reporters I've built a relationship with trust that if I'm sending them a press release, it's actually newsworthy and they'll cover it. If I was sending them things all the time that didn't interest them, they'd be less likely to look at the things that I do want them to cover. So when should you go to press about your research findings? Do go to the press if you're having a public event, a rally, a publicly open panel. Local press would be great for that if you're trying to drum up, audience for a panel discussion or a public event. You do go for peer-reviewed articles or new research discoveries that are subjects of public interest or public concern. Something that sheds light on something in the news right now. A new discovery, if I discovered a new species of bird, wouldn't that be cool? That is always news. A new very large partnership or grant, we're talking kind of 1 million or above, is at least local news. Anything with a local hook, so something new you've discovered or published about your local area or a particular local area. Don't hesitate if you publish something about a place that you don't live, but it's particular to that area, to go to that local news. When there's perhaps you published something years ago or done some research years ago, but it sheds light on an issue that's contemporary now. Or if you're seeing misinformation, then that is a great reason to go to the press, is to try and directly counteract that misinformation. Don't go to the press to share information about academic conferences, scientific talks, a publication that doesn't have public relevance. For example, our last presentation, while I think very interesting for people who are participating in knowledge exchange and trying to get better at it and looking at that science policy interface, isn't really interested in, to the general public. So wouldn't be a study to go to the press about. If it's only important in your research area, but not beyond that, probably don't go to the press, and definitely don't go to the press for ongoing research or preliminary results. Things might change, and we don't want to perpetuate any public ideas that scientists are untrustworthy or greatly uncertain. So wait until your research is finished, peer-reviewed, ready for publication. Ultimately, a good science communicator has some common qualities. Many different people do science communication, many different avenues, prefer different kinds of media, but ultimately all science communicators are credible. So that means they actually have some research history in that subject. They don't need to have a PhD or they don't need to have a certain position title, but usually have at least one or more peer-reviewed publications in that subject, some formal academic training. They're organized. It takes a lot of organization to be able to pull this off and know what the steps are and communicate with the reporters in a way that's effective. They're prepared, so you have your talking points ready. We'll talk about that. They're respectful of the reporter's interest and time, and they also are respectful from the audience. So that kind of leads into the fifth point, which is audience focused. So a good science communicator with the media knows who the audience is and treats them like they're smart, treats them like they're interested, and sort of assumes the best of their audience rather than talking down to them or chastising them or getting mad at them. So I'll take a minute to give you a couple of examples of proactive and reactive media that I've been involved with lately. A proactive example, so my lab did some research, just kind of desktop, nothing published, but suddenly noticed that in Nova Scotia, the amount of mining claims had massively increased, more than 20-fold. And there's a lot of new mining interest and activity, and no one had really kind of broken the story of just the sheer rate of increase of interest in mining activity, particularly gold mining in Nova Scotia. And at the same time, our regulatory regime hasn't been updated to kind of suitably deal with what might be a lot of new mines coming down the pipe. So within our lab, we did some work and decided we think someone should know about this. We didn't have peer-reviewed evidence, but we thought we had good enough evidence to go to the media. And in terms of credibility, members of our lab had a good enough track record with press, with publishing science, that we were confident that even though we weren't publishing something peer-reviewed, that folks would be interested in these findings. So what happened next was I sent a pitch to the Narwhal. We identified the Narwhal, which covers environmental news, as the group most likely to cover this information. A pitch is about a 250-word email. It's always an email. You never send in an attachment. It goes to the venue that you want to share your article with or share your information with. It tells them what the issue is, why it's important, and why their audience might be interested. And I actually give separate webinars or workshops on how to write pitch notes and opinion editorials. In this case, we'd already written the editorial. The Narwhal said, yes, we'd like it, sounds great. And it was published in the Narwhal several days later. So we'd pre-written the op-ed. Opinion editorial means, it actually means opposite the editorial, but it's colloquially become to know as opinion editorial. Back when we were all getting newspapers, there would be the editorial from the editor of the newspaper, and then the opposite the editorial, or the opinion section, was meant to showcase kind of public reaction. But basically all this means is that it's kind of it's not written by the newspaper or the print outlet, it's written by someone from the public who's contributing the article themselves. They're usually about 600 to 800 words, and they're an awesome way to kind of get started with interacting with traditional media, because They don't require you to do interviews. Interviews can be stressful and scary and hard the first times you do them, and honestly, sometimes still. After this was published, there was follow-up media. So then other news outlets saw this, contacted me, wanted interviews, they wanted video. So I did a couple of those. There was a little bit of radio and print media. That doesn't always happen. Usually an op-ed published is just kind of left there. But because we were breaking new information that had never been shared before, this did lead to some follow-up interest. This past week has been super busy because, as I think everyone knows, there have been catastrophic, horrific forest fires raging in Nova Scotia that are now contained, thank goodness. And I am a professor in forestry. So I wasn't surprised that I got some calls. I got some referrals from the press office. So reporters had contacted the communications department at Dalhousie, asked if they had anyone they could talk to. They found me. A chain of contacts, other people kind of in this sector who didn't want to be interviewed for one reason or another passed along my name. Or I had a number of reporters actually say, we saw you on that TV stuff about gold mining. Could you talk about fires as well? So as soon as I got one, and it was a bigger outlet, so the first one I think was Global News, you kind of know if you get a big one, you're going to get picked up in other places and requested for interview because they're all competing. If somebody's suddenly seen as like an expert or a good commentator, all of the different outlets want to also have that person as well. So I knew there was more coming. So I produced a really quick set of kind of keynotes about my take on how forestry was related to these wildfires and what some of the main concerns were. I came up with some sample questions I thought I might be asked. I've been really attentive to email. Like I said, responses are required within several hours, and knew that I needed to make sure that my schedule was flexible. So I messaged a lot of people that I had meetings scheduled with, and I said, look, I know we've got a meeting scheduled. I'm going to try and honor it. There's a chance that I might have to move it because press is going to happen. So I also decided, I've been doing press on this for about 10 days. I decided, you know, I'm kind of done now on this issue. More is coming, but there is a point too where it's like, how much is worth your time? So at this point, I feel like I've kind of done my responsibility job to get a clear message about climate change, about urban planning, about using better forestry practices to the public. And I've said my piece and it's available now. And so I won't kind of do any more press on this issue for now. So ultimately, to be effective, you need to get ready to do media, and then you need to stay ready. So first thing to do is to identify your audience, distill your message, prepare for spin, and then just ongoing maintenance things to stay ready. Preparing the first time is the hardest, gets easier every time you do it. So the first thing to do is to identify your audience for if you have a paper coming out and you think it might be of interest. Is it local? Is it national? What country is it in? Is it something that would lend itself well to print or TV or radio? If you have something that involves lab experiments that has anything visual, that might lend itself really well to TV. If you did a systematic literature review that has interesting results about all the forests in the world, that's probably for radio or for print and not for TV. But you want to think about what venues you might publish it in and what that audience's values are. So as you're sort of crafting your message, think about what your audience's political beliefs might be. And I'll kind of give you some examples as we go. So when you're distilling your message, for us who are all chatting with each other, we're specialists in our disciplines. We write academic papers or we give academic presentations. We talk about the context, how the research came to be. We share the methods for our research. We share our results, and then we discuss it. This is completely opposite for non-specialists. For the public, for the media, you flip this on the head. You start with a bottom line message. Hi. My name's Alana Westwood. I'm here to tell you that I have discovered a new species of worm. Boom, right out the gate. My name's Alana Westwood. I'm here to tell you how to protect your home from forest fires. Whatever it is, you start right there. From your bottom line message, you get to the consequences. So what? Why should your audience care? And then, if there's time, you will get into the background and context and how do we get here? And whether there's time depends on the medium. If you're being interviewed for print, they'll interview you for 10 minutes, they'll pull a couple of quotes from you. If you're being interviewed for TV, they'll interview you for 10 minutes. There'll be a 30-second to 2-minute clip. Radio, you have a little more time. Usually for the radio, you might have a 5 to 10-minute clip. So think about what you're being interviewed for and how much you can realistically get out that they're going to take, and focus on just delivering those messages. So when you're distilling your message, you want to ask yourself, what should the audience understand? What should they remember? And what's the appropriate framing? Framing really matters, and that's where thinking about your audience matters. So let's talk about the transition to net zero carbon. We're no longer emitting carbon, largely carbon dioxide. Any carbon dioxide that we are emitting is captured, sort of net zero carbon. What do we want the audience to understand? Probably in this context is just exactly what I've said. What is this? What should they remember? Is why this is important. Why this is important depends on the audience. So if you're talking to an environmentalist audience, the audience of the Narwhal or CBC or Democracy Now!, you want to frame it as a social movement for combating climate change. This group is really interested in climate change, is interested in collective action and civic participation. So you might frame this like, we need to get to net zero so that we can work together to combat climate change and ensure sort of strong, healthy, adapted communities. If you're going to be on CNN, Fox News, my goodness, that would be amazing. If anybody gets on Fox News, let me know. Or perhaps a right-wing radio show, your audience might be more libertarian. So in this case, you could deliver the same message, but frame it for energy independence. So you could talk about, in this transition to net zero, we're looking at more people producing their own power. People are getting off the grid. You can be independent. You can have control over your own power generation and not be reliant on the government to provide you with power. So this would target values of protectionism and security that this audience might have. So you also have to think about, what are your own values, and do you feel comfortable representing values that don't align with your own in order to get across a message that you think is important? That's a personal decision. Apologies for this cough. Hopefully I didn't get Jenna's flu through the screen. A tool for framing is, this is from Compass. Compass provides training to scientists on science communication called the Message Box. I won't go through it with detail. You can download it and a workbook around it from Compass. But basically the Message Box is meant to be printed out. It's meant to fit on one page, and you write in it, like handwrite in it. I know you can still do that, I believe, because you don't want to fit anything more than that. That size of these boxes. What's the problem? What's the issue? Solution? So what? What are the benefits? You want to distill your message into just exactly what you can fit in that box, and no more. If you're writing more, it's too much for public media. Another key thing to do is to replace jargon. Jargon is actually super important in academic and professional communications. It helps us reduce ambiguity and improve efficiency. Anybody who's worked in government knows there's a heck of a lot of jargon and acronyms, but it's with you in whatever realm you're in. So it helps people in the discipline understand the meaning and context. The public will not understand it, and it can lead to communication breakdown. So you want to look out for some field-specific jargon that you might be using. Here's some general that comes up in the science communication pipeline. For example, the scientific term, when we use a theory, we mean something that's actually been validated by a lot of hypotheses, but the public doesn't hear that. They hear that it's a hunch or it's a speculation. So you can replace the word theory with scientific understanding. When researchers say a positive trend, we mean a trend that is going up, not necessarily that it's good. The public hear that it's good. They hear a value judgment. So you would want to say a rising trend or an upward trend. We'll share the slides after, so I won't go through the rest, but here are some tips of words you can use to replace this scientific language that commonly gets misunderstood by the public. And there's this tool you can use from Science in the Public, the de-jargonizer. So you can take any piece of text you're trying to write for the public, pop it in, and then see what comes out in terms of how much jargon you have. So the next thing you want to do after you've prepped your message, you've found your audience, is you want to prepare, unfortunately, for backlash. It does happen. Scientists want to talk about facts. Journalists want to talk about values. We typically want to share empirical data. We want to talk about things that are testable, measurable, and objective. Journalists want to talk about values. They want to talk about what we should do, what we ought to do, what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. And a lot of the journalistic stories that you see take a really subjective lens. So scientists were rewarded in our structures for reporting well-researched facts, and were reprimanded for making value judgments. You can't do that in a peer-reviewed article. It's the opposite. Journalists are rewarded for raising controversies, gets more clicks, gets more eyes, and they're reprimanded only if they get the facts wrong. So you're going to want to assess your own risk of participating in the media. Depending on the subject, if it's highly political, you could be opening yourself up to personal attack. Never read the comments. Never do it. I know I say that. I've learned not to do it. Early in my career, I did it, and it was a huge mistake. Don't do it. Just don't do it. But you may determine that your risk of being a public face, of being a communicator, is too high. Believe it or not, I have received 3 pieces of hate mail for an op-ed I wrote about how to protect your property from wildfires. I didn't know that was something that I could get hate mail about, but you know, there it is. And then finally, you want to stay ready. So whatever your different research areas are, or the topics that you're working in, keep message boxes for them and update them regularly, maybe quarterly. Within your kind of research group, you want to conduct mock interviews, practice storytelling, keep a list of metaphors to help you explain complex things, so that you can practice those metaphors on people in your personal life. Learn to write op-eds and press releases, and you can make use of training resources to support you in kind of taking the first forays into this world. You also will want to keep a press list. Once you start talking to reporters, here's a redacted version of mine. So every time you communicate with a reporter that this does happen, save their contact information, write down what venue they work with, and in your notes of your contacts, write what they interviewed you about. And now you'll start generating your own press list of people who know you and trust you for when you have something that you want to share out. Also professionally, this is a bad screen grab because I just started one for the lab and I haven't even told the lab about it yet. So we don't have the other lab members' media in here yet, but record all the media you do. This will be important for annual reviews, for if you're going an academic stream, demonstrating public engagement for tenure and promotion. It's important for kind of highlighting accomplishments of people in your research groups, and it's great for applying to grants. So if you're able to say when you're applying to a grant, well, this last grant we got, here's all the media around it, and here's where it was featured, et cetera, and give some statistics, that's very helpful. So we kind of track which project the media is associated with. If anybody wants to go deeper, like I said, I have in the past given workshops on writing press releases, op-eds, and briefing notes, but they're also recorded online. You can watch them from Evidence for Democracy. And also they have some good ones on preparing plain language summaries, addressing scientific information, and how to get better at storytelling for effective science communication. So I encourage you to watch these, and not just to watch them, but to kind of workshop alongside them some research that you have. Okay, so that's it for the presentation. It went longer than I expected. I apologize, but hopefully we still got 10 minutes if people want to talk about their own questions that they might have about engaging with the media.